Cool. Hi. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to TransferWise and to our inaugural Product Talks. Cool. Thanks. Okay, before we begin, a little admin. Fire exits are around there in case we need them, as are toilets, but don't go to the toilet until the end, if that's all right. And welcome to TransferWise and to our first Product Talks. So, how many people here know what TransferWise is? Cool. Awesome. How many people have used TransferWise? How many people haven't used TransferWise? Anthony, disappointed. So just a little introduction on TransferWise. We're a leader in cross-border payments. We're moving more than £2 billion a month for our customers, saving them over £3 million a day. Fast growth business, still doubling in size more or less annually, with more than 1,500 people working with us around the world. But today isn't to talk about TransferWise, it's about our first product talk. To be honest, I'm a bit nervous about this. I don't normally get nervous about talking in public, as most of the TransferWise people know. But I've never really tried to do this, which is really open the lid on our product organization. How does it work? How do we build product here at TransferWise? What works well and what doesn't work well? And I kind of passionately believe about sharing our learnings and our failings in public and getting thoughts from the wider product community on what we could be doing better and trying to do differently. So looking forward to lots of questions and thoughts at the end, either to me or to any of the TransferWise people around. So the subject of this, our first product talk here is Mr. Mo Khan, and who's our balance product manager. And when I told Mo the first product talk is going to be an interview with you, he said, Why me? Who'd want to hear anything about my journey here? And Mo joined here as an intern, and 4 years ago out of university, and ended up building our Borderless bank account product. And for me anyway, it was a pretty inspiring journey to watch the journey he went on over 4 years from an intern out of university to building something that's powering a significant portion of our growth. And why that's inspiring is obviously I think anyone in this room could do that, whether you're inside or outside TransferWise. And for the people outside, is to give you an idea of the kind of opportunities that exist in startups today. And for people inside TransferWise who are joining us in the room or via the stream, I still believe today you can build your career in that kind of way, in the same kind of way that Mo did over the last 4 years. Sorry, could I get some water? Sorry, thanks. So to kick things off, over to Mo.
Good evening. Good evening.
Mo, so we should start off with how we met. So how did we meet?
Yeah. So in university, I built a side project, which was to do with offering students a virtual pinboard where they could sell their books and advertise their rooms, etc.
It's kind of like Gumtree.
Kind of, but better.
Why was it better than Gumtree?
So it was something that was meant to be tailored specifically for students. So before I built this project, I had actually spoken to quite a few students. I also had books that I wanted to offload myself. But what I found was that Gumtree was not perceived to be that relevant because it was too open and out of context. And students were also too lazy to post on eBay. So what students were doing were they were either pinning stuff on physical pinboards or they were posting on Facebook. Neither of which were very effective. And I decided to build a side project to see how it went. To be honest, I didn't really have any core business plan behind it. I just wanted to build something that people used.
Cool, yeah. Your co-founder was my cousin Anthony. Hi, Anthony.
Indeed.
And I remember Anthony ringing me up saying, "Dude, I'm thinking of leaving university and doing this this cool startup, and I was like, dude, that's not a cool startup. And he goes, could you spend some time with us, because we're really not growing, and we spend a bunch of time together. And anyway, fast forward to you kind of finished university, and you had these, I think these 3 choices, right? So you could try to make your startup a success, which wasn't a smart idea. You could, you had an offer from a bank. What was that about?
JP Morgan, a graduate analyst.
So you're going to be an investment banker.
I was going to work at a bank, yeah.
So just everyone hold a thought. Just try to imagine Mo in a suit at an investment bank. So it was your second offer, and then I obviously pitched you. So I joined TransferWise, and I didn't have a team, but I kind of picked up part of the product, which we can talk about in a sec, and I needed help, so you could help me out. So how'd you make the decision on where to spend your time and what to do after university?
Yeah, so my main goal was to not go into banking. So I took a year out after university to figure out what to do. And one of the options was try and make this project that I was working on to see where it would go. And yeah, so I think it was pretty lucky, and you were almost my savior and angel when I met you, that you invited me to TransferWise.
That's cool. All right, I kind of don't quite get that, but what was it about TransferWise or the opportunity that attracted you at that point in time, and then why did you decide to stay?
Yeah, so to be honest, initially when I joined TransferWise, I joined because of Nilan. Because when I first met Nilan, I felt that I had a lot to learn from him.
And that went after like a week.
Yeah.
But it's true, yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
To go pretty fast, and then I can get like when you start at school and you're out of school and you meet someone who's working in startups, then you're like, cool, I can learn from that person.
Yeah.
After a while, obviously we kind of worked together for a bit, but then we drifted apart. Why did you still come to work here?
So during the internship, after about a month, I realized...
You joined as an intern here?
Yeah, I joined as an intern. And after about a month, I realized 2 things about TransferWise. One was that I was surrounded by people just like Nilan, so very bright, very inspiring, very intelligent, and it was an environment that I could learn a lot from.
You mean people nothing like me?
No need to be modest. Yeah, so, and actually one of my primary life goals at that time was I wanted to build something awesome that people use and find useful. And that fit very well with that sort of goal. And the second thing I realized was that TransferWise was genuinely mission driven. I'm a pretty cynical person, and so I like to think that I can tell when something is a true intention or not. And what I felt about TransferWise is that people actually care about giving fair fees to people transferring money. And I find that quite inspiring and refreshing, so I decided to stay after my internship.
Okay, cool. So this genuine mission-driven thing and surrounded by smart people are the reasons why you decided to stay. Let's go to this genuine mission-driven thing. Like, what were let's leave TransferWise to a side, but what were the kinds of things you'd see in an organization that was genuinely mission-driven? What made you think this was different?
I think I found that people were sort of passionate to a fault at TransferWise. In my discussions and conversations, they really cared about what they were doing, and you can actually even see it in the arguments that happen. So the people in my team are some of the most sort of passionate and opinionated people I've met, and that's down to the fact that people care. And so even when it comes to the debates that happen inside the company and the arguments that happen, they happen because people care, and I find that pretty refreshing.
And is there any, there's a bunch of people here who are founders of their own companies. Like, what's the magic around, do you think, that you can do to get your people to care? How does that happen?
So I think the main ingredient is, in terms of human psychology, the main ingredient is having a intrinsic goal. So a goal that is that revolves around helping people. And I think that's what the goal of TransferWise is around. I think it's pretty much as simple as that, really.
So like, if genuinely the company motivation isn't about, I guess, making money or stuff like that, then you end up with, and people, I guess, spot that and see that. Then if you've started that at its core, then I guess the rest of it kind of takes care of itself. I can sympathise with that. I can kind of see how that works. Okay, so you joined, and the first team you joined was the virality team, and you had the misfortune. So Mo joined as an engineer, and the product manager, he was on the refer a friend team, and I was the product manager, which is like, if anyone who knows me, this is like a really bad recipe for disaster. So you started coding. Had you ever coded before?
Yeah, plenty.
Plenty, cool. Had you worked with Grails before you joined here?
Not necessarily. No, not Grail. No, I had to learn it from scratch.
You had to learn it from scratch. Cool. How did you get through that? Did you have training? Did you just Google your friend and Stack Exchange, or how did you make it?
I mostly just figured it out. I had support from developers in different teams, but I mostly it's very similar to Java, if I remember correctly. So I could figure it out.
Work your way through it. There was something I realized around the virality time where I watched you take more and more ownership of the refer a friend thing and start to figure out how to drive the product. Can you talk through that journey of how that happened?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty simple. I started gathering customer insights about the problems we should solve and what we should prioritize. Before that phase, I had very limited data. It was basically my data and my experiences versus your data and your experiences. So I relied on your data and your experiences. But once we had customer insights, it sort of brought a greater authority in terms of decision making. And that allowed me to be basically more confident in driving decisions.
So just talking to customers, getting data of how they're behaving, and that gave you conviction to start to make changes in the product.
Indeed. Yeah.
Which is something, a kind of pattern I learned and saw product managers go through here. After that, there was this product that you built that failed called Request Money.
Yep.
It was a failure, yeah.
Oh, it was. I think it was ahead of its time, and I'll explain.
What is it, like a few hundred years ahead of its time, or
No, just a couple of years.
couple of years?
Yeah.
So it means like if we launched it now, you think it would work?
Absolutely.
Also, do you want to just talk the audience through what it was and why it failed, maybe?
Yeah. So the inspiration for Request Money came from actually two sources. One was the invite program. So after a few months of iterating on the invite program, what we realized was that the people who are truly evangelical already invite their friends through word of mouth and other means. They don't necessarily engage or need to engage with an invite program. And the people who did engage with the invite program, the majority were motivated by money. And so the kind of takeaway from that was there's probably better opportunities in virality than the invite program, more directly from a product perspective, more product-led virality. So how can we get our customers, or how can we build features that are inherently viral? And second, the second sort of inspiration was we did some extra research on the UK market, and in terms of the use cases overall, on why people transfer money in the UK market versus why people transfer money in TransferWise. We found certain use cases where we were under-indexed for those use cases, so which means people were unlikely to use TransferWise for those use cases versus to make money transfer for that use case in general in the UK. And one of these use cases was one-off purchases, and another was payments between friends and family. So this kind of inspired the hypothesis that if we build a product like Request Money, where we allow our customers to request money from people who are not customers, this would kind of solve a combination of these two problems.
Cool. I got that. Just there's a bunch of TransferWise speaking there, so we just to make sure I also understood it correctly. you were working on the refer a friend program that gave money to people when they referred friends, and then you noticed that people referred with that money through telling their friends, and you wondered if we could build features that would encourage people to do that, and this requesting money feature came from that.
Yeah.
And it failed because the onboarding was difficult. Yeah.
So there's a couple of reasons why it failed. It didn't really fail. So one of the reasons was customers, so payers who are paying our customers didn't necessarily like having to onboard onto TransferWise, and our onboarding flow was pretty elongated. And the second reason was that the failure rate of card payments, so when customers try to pay when payers of our customers try to pay using the card, our failure rate was high because of various reasons, one of them being that we were not a payment processor.
Cool.
And the reason why I say Request Money was ahead of its time is that now that we have the Borderless Account, it's a product that makes much more sense integrated into the Borderless Account, because what Borderless empowers Request Money to become is it takes away a lot of those onboarding
frictions. So it was hard to onboard and use the product on the Request Money side. So it fails. Let's just talk about through what did that failure feel like? How did so you kind of moved off the team as well, but just from the outside, how did the organization deal with the failure? Did someone say shut this product down? It's dead and this failed. How did that happen?
No, I think the failure was the retirement of the product was self-imposed by the team. There was no external instruction.
It's quite a novel concept, right? So the team got to the point of realizing the product wasn't succeeding and wasn't gaining traction and driving growth, and decided to retire the product.
Yep.
I guess when you think about that almost psychologically, that's super hard to imagine happening unless I guess the team could find something else that looked more. There were other opportunities, I'm guessing, that were more exciting. Which one of them is this borderless thing that you're talking about. Do you want to just we just step through this maybe step by step? So the borderless is our bank account for consumers and for businesses. I kind of understand how it followed as a result of talking to customers and understanding the failures of the request money problems. I think most people here are familiar with that. I think what might be useful is you worked through this period of getting talking to customers, understanding the use cases for Borderless, and getting it ready for launch.
Yeah.
What were the most unexpected things you learned during that period post-launch? What surprised you once you launched Borderless?
So actually, there were not many unexpected things. What we observed was that the use cases that people are using the account for,
Which are
so freelancers receiving money internationally, businesses sending and receiving money internationally, and expats living abroad and moving abroad, benefiting from the features of the Borderless Account. So in terms of the actual use cases that people were using it for, there were not many surprises. In fact, it was pretty empowering because we had reports of people replacing their bank accounts.
People actually told you they shut down their bank account.
Yes.
How did that feel as a team when you had someone write to you and say they shut down their bank account to use Borderless?
Felt very splendid, yes.
Very splendid. And why? That's pretty awesome. I guess for it to feel splendid, their old bank account must have been pretty bad, was it?
Yes, well, it depends what they were using it for. So we focused on very cross-border use cases. That's where TransferWise sort of provides its value. And
so people who were using their bank account and doing lots of cross-border stuff, they shut it down and switched over. That's cool. So you had that bit. Was there anything that surprised you? Any things that people used it for or asked to use it for that you didn't expect them to? Or
so the first thing that was mildly surprising was that it was far more popular among personal users than business users. And the second thing, which I didn't really expect that much, was there's a high demand for cryptocurrency.
Cryptocurrency, so like Bitcoin,
Yeah.
things like that. So you can do a bunch of stuff with Bitcoin today with Borderless, but So the people were asking, I guess, to hold like a Bitcoin balance. Yeah. So why haven't we built that then?
So it's not been a priority for us because we haven't come across a problem that cryptocurrency in itself would materially solve.
But people hold it.
Sorry?
People are holding crypto all the time.
Indeed, but when you look at the market for crypto, your grandmother isn't holding crypto. It's not a mainstream.
Not my grandmother. Yeah.
Yes, my grandmother's not holding crypto. It's not a mainstream currency. It's currently used for mainly speculation and trading. So,
and for Borderless then, okay, gotcha. So that was the kind of delineating factor, like dollars and euros aren't. I guess some people speculate with them, but you can spend them. But crypto was mainly that. Okay, cool. And do you guys just look through the customer feedback and made the decision not to build that feature off the back of that?
It was never really among our top 5 or 10 sort of priorities in terms of what customers wanted. Yeah, crypto was a surprising ask, but it was never among the top asks. So we always had other bigger things to consider.
For example?
Like basic features like direct debit, lower fees, having a better protection of your funds, etc.
Cool. All right. Very clear. So let's move on now. That's cool. That's kind of taken us more or less up to date with your journey through TransferWise and launching Borderless. Let's move on now and switch gears and talk a bit about what it's like to work here. Right. Mm-hmm. So whenever you hear someone from TransferWise talking at a conference or blogging, they use this slide. I don't know where this comes from. That we work in autonomous teams. So, like, what does that mean? What's in your what have you seen that mean in your own personal experience?
Yeah, so I can testify that there are autonomous teams in TransferWise because I have first-hand experience of actually my team changing direction completely. And this has happened, as we discussed, this has happened.
So what does autonomous a team mean? It means that a team can change direction.
So yeah, it means a few things. It means a team sets its own direction and KPIs. A team is responsible for its own data collection and collection of insights from customers. And a team is empowered to change its direction if it feels fit.
Okay, well, let's just step this through. So can kind of get why it makes sense for some of those things. So imagine if you've got a team whose mandate is make the Borderless account better. I'd hope that team can define like some measure, like a KPI. Who sets the target like for the team? Like how? Like next year, we have like so many hundreds of million in our Borderless accounts and saving our customers so many millions of pounds. Like, who sets the target for the team?
The team itself sets the target.
So, but don't they set themselves an easy target?
No, that's what you might expect actually. But historically, I found that teams actually are overambitious.
Okay, that's cool. So you have, and what causes the overambition is driven through just they want to move, solve the problem that much. Okay, cool. So I'm a team. I've got this mandate around Borderless. I set this KPI around whatever cross-border volume moved, and I set a target against it. And then I guess I can figure out what to do as a team. So like how to make that happen. It makes sense for the team to do that. What happens if I need help of another team? How does that work? Because then, and say that other team's working, it's got its own plan and come up with something else. Like how does that resolve itself?
I think that brings us to actually what I think can be a material disadvantage of autonomy, is that so where autonomy really works is within the silos of teams. Getting to local maxima of a team optimizing its KPI is faster with autonomy. But where autonomy kind of breaks down slightly, or can break down, is once you have dependencies between teams, and once you have the need for cross-team collaboration. And the reason for this is when you have separate teams that are setting their own roadmap and KPIs, getting these aligned can be a big task.
But that's your job as a product manager, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a less efficient process. Generally than top-down sort of management of roadmaps for both teams.
That's very true. So it's much easier to get 20 people to go in the same direction if someone says go in this direction. The challenge is I've always found is finding someone who knows where to go. So I think unfortunately the reason why we've not been able to kind of give these teams this direction is I don't think anyone's kind of like able to say super clearly the answer across such a complex prioritization. So how in practice do these how do these discussions happen? When you say like, imagine there's a team owning the logged in experience for a customer and Borderless launches and that needs to change and they're working on something else and you go and say, hey guys, we're doing this, and then what happens?
So actually I should preface this by the fact that teams can change product areas of other teams. So there is a route if the team is blocked by another team. But in the instance where there is a dependency on another team, what was your question again on that?
So how does it get resolved? So I think you kind of half answered it. So like, say you want to go and change the account page, and they say we're not working on that, and then you kind of half said it there. So you can go and change that yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. But the team, if they don't like your changes, they can reject it?
Yes, they can reject it, but it obviously evokes a discussion, which can be a rational discussion.
Okay, do you find that's cool? And just to give a feel for how well this works, how often do you see these things getting rationally resolved, and sometimes they kind of drag on a bit? So like half the time they kind of sort themselves out, or 3/4?
Roughly about half, I would say.
Half.
Yeah.
Cool. This is a bit on autonomy. What about management and leadership? So we definitely have, we all got bosses here, right? So like engineers report up into tech leads, into dev leads, into our VPN, into Krista, and so you'd always have a boss. And it's been fun watching you learn how to deal with them. So let's just zoom into a few different examples. So a couple of things I've seen people get quite emotional about is when the Borderless account was getting close to launch, and we slipped the launch date. How do you? I saw a few people getting a bit wound up about that around the business. How do you manage that as a team? Like, how do you manage that conversation?
It's pretty rational. So when we want to launch something, we define a critical scope of what we want to launch with, and this is what we agreed as a team, that this is the minimum that we think is an acceptable experience to launch with. So if this critical scope is not met, then if it's us that's setting the deadline, then we choose not to launch it. And this is what we communicate to anyone who might question that.
Cool. What about, and then let's talk a bit about, so I guess our relationship. I saw, I think you touched on it earlier a bit, where it wasn't so much like over time I saw you, so this can be perceived as ignoring, but it's more like you kind of building a conviction. So what, I guess I'll ask the question a different way. I see sometimes you get these managers in companies or senior people that come in with a strong opinion of, hey guys, you should do this. Not that's me, but anyway. And a weak thing that happens sometimes is when people just jump and do it without kind of thinking, right? Just if you talk through how do you learn to manage that, people swooping in with strong opinions, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so the way I personally see managers the way I personally see anyone in a given company is a single data point. And so what I try and do is find a source of information and data that has higher authority than either myself or my managers or anyone in the company. And so especially in a company like TransferWise, where it's full of passionate people, opinionated people, I think for a product manager, it's pretty important to be able to do that. Otherwise, it can be quite destabilizing. So what I've generally done is have a hierarchy of sources of information which I deem to be the most important and to matter the most. And so the first in the hierarchy is obviously customers themselves. What they say about the problems, how emotional they are about when they express their problems, as well as the data that underpins their behavior. So by having this sort of higher authority source, it kind of gives me the confidence to challenge and push back on opinions from inside the company, whether it's my management or like my colleagues.
Cool. Wow. That's pretty cool. Makes a lot of sense. Should we talk a bit about what it's like working with founders or with, say, Christo? What's he like? Is he inspiring? What does he inspire with? And then does he get involved with the detail, and how does that happen?
Yeah, so I actually really enjoy working with Christo on a net perspective because one quality he has, which I really admire, is he has almost an inability to accept sort of the current version of reality. So he will.
It sounds quite dangerous.
So he will. He's almost unable to take things at face value, and that's what I really admire because historically I've seen that to be quite effective in helping us get things that we wanted, or just to move in a direction that we wanted to, that we might otherwise not feel is possible. So
that sounds also like the challenge at times.
Indeed. On the other hand, I think what can be perceived as difficult dealing with Christo is that he believes in the mission so much that you could even say he's almost diseased by the mission, which kind of sort of drives him to be passionate in some discussions, which may perceive to be otherwise, insistent or aggressive or whatever. But I think what makes it tolerable is that it's driven by something again that has a sort of a purpose and a value that's outside of like money or greed. It's based on a mission, so that's what makes it. It makes it okay to experience.
Well, so just to check, so there's this inspiring quality, which you kind of alluded to earlier, that this company is all about this mission and changing stuff for our customers. But obviously, that can be a bit passionate at times. But as long as it's coming from that place, it's a good thing. Cool. I only have a couple more questions, and then we'll open up to the floor. Building your career here. So I meet a lot of young people out of university, and they have this idea of this thing called a career that they want to develop. I have no idea how to do this thing. And they're like, how do I build my career? How do I build my career at TransferWise as well? Like, what are the steps I need to go on? What's the path I need to go down? What training do I get? How do I get developed through that? Who supports me? How did that work for you here?
To be honest, I never really thought of it in a sort of strategic way of developing my career. I was basically operating on two principles. I always knew that I wanted to be part of building something awesome, and I kind of had two principles to help me get there. The first principle was try and figure out what is the highest impact thing that you could work on. And second principle, which is more of a selfish principle, is try and find the highest responsibility that you can sort of convince others into letting you do. Basically, because I kind of valued sort of the possibility of public failure as kind of a personal growth indicator. So these two things combined were pretty much the only thing I really focused on in terms of progressing my career. But I never really had a strategy or a plan on how I would progress my career.
So just focusing on your impact, but then just looking at that as something to do, but but all along the way there were things that you'd never done before, like product management or coding or whatever. So how did you solve that gap?
With TransferWise, it's pretty easy because you're surrounded by so much smart people.
People who've done it before, I guess? Or?
Yeah, people who've done different pockets of it before. So that's one thing I like about sort of the loose management here, is that you choose your manager based on the context. So if I wanted to learn about how to build a anti-money laundering policy, I can go speak to our compliance officer and then he can be my authority in that subject. If I wanted to learn about UX, I can go get support from whoever the strongest UX person is in TransferWise. So I had a sort of a pool of people that I could go and get sort of learning and inspiration from, and that's, I guess, how I learnt.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. I've seen a few people work through that, and it's interesting because I see people here kind of when they join. There's this you kind of see them in the first year. Kind of some people thrive in that kind of environment of where they the opportunities there. They need to figure out for themselves how to develop through it, and others need a bit of support to make from their lead to help them get through that and figure out how to build their path here. One last couple of questions. It was a wise CEO I met once who said to me this line, gave me this advice which I've never followed, right? Which was like, so Nilan, remember, like, when you're growing a business, the guy that's going to grow your marketing team from 0 to 100, like, it's not the same person that's going to grow it from 100 to 300. You're going to hire someone else to go from 300 to 800, like that. And people have natural ceilings, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just don't believe in that, personally. And it's just curious, but then I see like people like you start off as an intern and start coding in a product, and then start building and developing another bigger and bigger products that have bigger and bigger impacts. How do you keep yourself current? How do you keep yourself able to keep having a bigger and bigger impact in an organization where, because it's getting so big, to have a bigger impact means just like it's always way harder over time?
Great question. So I don't necessarily think that the challenges you face, whether you're working on a low impact project or a high impact project, are necessarily get harder themselves. I normally have historically just come across something that I needed to do that I may have not had a clue about how to do, and I'd go and figure out how to do it, whether it's reading regulation or figuring out how anti-money laundering works, or like sort of getting information for people inside the company. I don't think going from 1 to 100 or 100 to 1,000, that the challenges you face are necessarily more difficult. They may be different, but there's nothing to say that you need a different class of person to face these challenges. I think what I would say is that one of my points of failure, especially in the past year, is not hiring people to help me. And I sort of realized far too late that I needed help. So I think as the scope and the company grows, you will need to hire people to help you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you in itself are redundant.
Very cool. So we should talk about what's next for Mo. So we have this cool policy: when you hit after 4 years here, you get to take 6 weeks off and go on a holiday, sabbatical. Yours is coming up. What are your plans?
So one of my sort of deepest passions is flying. I have a private pilot's license, so I'm going to be spending. I want to sort of progress that further. So I will be spending my sabbatical, sort of upgrading it to a commercial.
I have this dream. So like people who work at TransferWise know this. Every probably once a month, you might fly out to Tallinn, our office there, and have the pleasures of the 6 o'clock Ryanair flight. I have this dream that one day I get on the flight and Mo's the captain coming over the intercom, and it's like gone full circle from this intern who built TransferWise to flying the team there to Tallinn. But that's it. So thanks very much for that, Mo. It was a bit of an experiment for us going through sharing that in that way. It was a bit definitely a first time we did it. The things I took away from your story, and the things I hear from people internally, and when we hire people in, that they're looking for is this. I think that I took away were this focus on the customer is kind of throughout like a thread of everything you said. This genuine kind of like empowerment of product people and engineers, and there are good things and bad things that come with that, and there are people that work well in that environment and others that will struggle. And the third thing was this kind of getting it done culture of whether it's regulation or learning to code, like just figuring out how to do it yourself to have an impact. I think that's a fair reflection of what it's like to work here and what it takes to succeed here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very cool. Would you recommend it to your friends?
Indeed, I would. Yes.
Very cool. On that thought, join me in giving a round of applause to Mo. Unbelievably, Mo's not, surprisingly, Mo's not used to much public speaking, poor guy, so that was quite an ordeal. So we've got time for a couple of questions. We'll take two from the audience and then one or two from the Facebook stream. Zhao, do you want to shout them out?
Yep. So the first one, how does the company as a whole make sure boring tasks get done if all teams are autonomous?
Cool. Mo.
We have teams that do boring stuff.
Yeah. That's cool. Why do they turn up to work, those guys and girls?
Because you may find it boring, but they believe in what they do.
Simple one. Simple answer. Yeah. Great. Zhao, next question. Any other questions, Zhao? No?
Yes.
Yeah.
How did the failure of your money request products affect your work on the Borderless account?
It was actually part of the inspiration for the Borderless account. So it definitely contributed to the insights that led to the Borderless account. As I mentioned, one of the problems we faced was that the onboarding had too much friction. We also had feedback from customers that not having a balance sort of made it inconvenient and costly to actually use the product as well. So, and a lot of the customers that the request money product was relevant for are also freelancers, and the Borderless account was also aimed at freelancers. So it was one of the sort of inspirations that led to the Borderless account.
Very cool. And any questions from the stream, Anna or Zhao?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
How do you make sure your teams are as diverse as your users, and do you care?
Oh, cool. I'll take this one. So I do care, but I think we're quite bad at this. So at some levels lots of things we're good at. We have like over 50 nationalities working here. We have more than 50 nationalities in our customer base. That's awesome. Headline numbers on gender diversity sound pretty awesome. It's like more or less 50-50. But when you dive in the detail by team or by level, the picture's less great. So not many female engineers, or on the leadership team is probably about 30% now, 20-30% female. So we definitely have more work to do there. So yeah, I think we all kind of believe the product. We're building this product for customers, and if we don't reflect our customer base, we're not going to be able to empathize with them that well, and we're not going to end up building a great product either. Cool. Any more questions? One more, Zhao, or
Yes.
last one? Cool. Make it a good one.
Okay, you want a very good one. Could you explain your problem-solving process within the teams? How do designers and developers work together at TransferWise?
That's a hard one. Probably worth trying to do it with an example. So actually, I got the best answer for that one. So that one's so hard to answer. What we're going to do is I'm going to get Duncan Lamb, our design director, and he's going to be doing a product talk in 2 weeks' time, and we'll get him to answer that one then. But that's probably the best way of handling that. Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. We're going to be beer and drinks for I think another hour or so, and any more questions? Grab me or Mo or anyone from the TransferWise team. Thanks very much.